Hi, I'm Lucas Kendall, and this is my friend Charlie Vignola, and we are here to discuss screenwriting because children are dying in Ukraine, but this is our priority. How do you even,
Very,
how do you even wake up in the morning? It's so terrible.
it's a tough world out there right now. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
And we're doing this remotely so we don't slap each other.
No, really, folks, we really like each other. It's cool.
Oh,
So yeah, let's talk about that, Lucas, because I don't think that we really, it would be malpractice if, as entertainment people, we didn't at least discuss the event that occurred at the Oscars, the slap that was heard around the world. It was a big deal. Full disclosure, I worked for Jerry Bruckheimer for over 30 years,
wait,
and
say that again. We're not aware of that.
yeah, it's arguable that our company helped the person in question develop his career and help him become the biggest movie star in the world. So, and I will also say, full disclosure, any interaction I've ever had with Will has actually been very, very nice. In fact, funny little tidbit: when we were originally making the original Bad Boys, and Will was in our offices at Disney in the old animation building, I was newly married. I'd gotten into an argument with my wife. It was really painful. And one of the arguments was the fact that I was like working late and that, we were developing Bad Boys and Will was in the offices. So as Will was coming out of a meeting, I pulled him aside. I said, "This is really weird, Will, but can you do me a favor? My wife's like just really upset right now that, that we're working so hard. I'm coming home late. We're trying to have kids. Like, would you write me a permission slip and sort of explain what's going on, why I'm late coming home?" And Will was like, "Oh, no problem, no problem." So we went over and he found a piece of paper. He wrote a little note to my wife. I was like, "That's very nice of you, Will. Thank you." Drove home that night and my wife was really angry at me. And I was like, "Here, Will Smith, wrote me a permission slip, honey." And she took it and she crumbled it and she threw it in the garbage and continued unabated. But it was nice of Will to do that. And again, I'm just going to say, whether it was Will or anybody, somebody tells a joke you don't like in the middle of a major telecast like that, and you walk on stage and you physically assault the person who told the joke, it's on you. And from that point on, you should experience consequences. And so far, it seems like the consequence minimal. He got to get his award, he got to give his speech, and now I understand. I've heard a little birdie say that the Academy has been discussing potential real consequences, again, as real as Academy consequences can be, about how they're going to handle this, but they're taking it quite seriously, because it was like a real black mark on the Academy and how they handled it. And as the news did explain, they did ask him to leave. He refused. So I guess they were limited in terms of what they could do to handle it, but they tried. And hopefully they'll handle this in a way that will dissuade future ornery people from doing crazy things at the ceremonies. Yeah.
So yeah, it was bizarre to watch. I was like, oh, another bit. And I was like, whoa. And then when they tried the 7-second delay and they ran out of seconds to delay, I was like, oh. I said to my father-in-law who's visiting, I said, no, that's real. And then we found the Japanese broadcast. Totally weird. I'm not surprised that he's normally a very likable, charismatic person. And it's just an obvious reminder that movie stars can often be volatile people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of pressure. It's like anybody who runs for office is crazy, just want to do that to themselves and their family. Anybody who's that dedicated to try and be a movie star is going to be, as nice as they might be, there's a lot going on there. Yeah, obviously you can't hit people. And it was, I think also, now people don't know this, but Charlie and I are experts on the Black experience. So we should, I was thinking immediately, because it's just me, I was like, thank God they're both Black. I mean, it's terrible for what this is. This does not reflect well on Black people, and they're going to have to deal with that. But if he had if a white guy hit a black person, he's in jail. He's got to be.
Right.
If a black, now if a, how many permutations can there be?
If a black person hit a white person, that would be bad too. And anything but this.
Yes. It's just, but am I even in trouble for mentioning this? But this is where my brain went. Like, oh,
you're about to be canceled for that comment.
I'll be canceled for this comment.
But yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's really interesting. At first, when people were talking about this and it was exploding all over the internet, it was like, we're making too much out of it. But like, are we? Like, I don't know. I mean, it is, post COVID, post Trump, an era where the guardrails have come off civilized behavior. People are feeling much more comfortable acting like complete a-holes in public. And this is just the most dramatic example of that. One of the biggest movie stars in the world striking the biggest comedian in the world.
Yeah,
that's huge.
It's I think people have always been crazy, and we tend to forget it because there are periods where there are certain norms and then somebody breaks a norm and then other terrible things happen. We, as individuals and as a society, we have a way to just roll with things. We've just spent 2 years in a century, once in a century pandemic, and now there's a land war in Europe, and it's like life goes on. It's all sad. Yeah,
well, speaking of sad, Lucas, the other big entertainment news over the last day or two that's broken is Bruce Willis retiring from acting.
Yeah, that's sad. And because you probably heard there were rumors that something was going on with him. You have a friend who makes those movies, right?
Yeah, in fact, a good friend of mine, Randall Emmett, produced a lot of the films that Bruce has starred in over the past 4 or 5 years. These sort of lower budgeted kind of thrillers where Bruce would be paid a certain amount and do, a week's worth of work. Early on, I think people's thoughts were, oh, he's just, doing this because it's easy and, he's, taking advantage. And then in retrospect, it looks like he might not have been capable of more sustained acting. Like that might be the limits of what he could do given his condition.
Seems like he was trying to bank some money while he could.
Yeah, and so I'm saying, like, in retrospect, it looks like he was doing what he was capable of doing, and my friend Randy was kind of helping out in that way. But like, yeah, it's kind of an unusual situation, and it's sad. And again, we made Armageddon with Bruce Willis, and Bruce is obviously a huge icon, action star, and it's for anybody who saw The Father, the Anthony Hopkins movie, it's like, this is a very difficult kind of situation to get into when your cognitive skills start to wane. I will say, just personal experience, I had COVID about a year ago, literally a year ago, and like, I would say there's a little bit of COVID fog probably from that, little things that I'm kind of forgetting here and there, and it's unsettling for sure. But for it to happen as in as large a scale as it appears to be happening with Bruce Willis, scary, very scary.
A public figure.
Yeah.
I always heard he could be prickly. I mean, some people.
Who, Bruce?
Yeah.
Wait. You're saying so they're major movie stars that play action heroes? You think that
you're right. That's
potentially prickly? It seems unlikely. That seems very unlikely.
Yeah, no, you're right.
They're all very nice guys. I will say this. This is something I think that can also attest to, which is in Hollywood, the movie stars that play the nicest guys are sometimes not the nicest guys in real life, but the nicest guys are the guys that play the villains. The villains, the most monstrous people in movies and TV, are ironically the sweetest, nicest people in the real world. It's such an interesting dichotomy. Really, really cool.
Well, yeah, because they don't have any ego about doing that, and it's sort of the people who play those villains are kind of like more likely to be character actors, and more likely to have some sort of perspective where it's not their identity. There's definitely. They're great actors and they're movie stars, and sometimes they're the same people, like when it's Marlon Brando, and sometimes, they're not. Sometimes there's a great movie star who can't. What is that thing? I can't remember where I read this, but the example was like Johnny Depp is like a bad good actor, and Keanu Reeves is a good bad actor.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting That's an interesting way to
Keanu
put
has
it.
a limited range, but he's always, likable and believable. And he's supposed to be a super nice guy. Is that correct?
Yeah, he is supposed to be a super nice guy. Like again, there's lots of it depends on who you talk to on any given day. Like you and I have certain friends in the industry who are like, well, everybody's always nice to me. It's like, yeah, because you're you. It's like they're not nice to like everybody on set or the PAs. That's not how it works. But you have something they want, so of course they're nice to you.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of pressure. I was in my 2-day directing career. I was not I was a nervous wreck and full of anxiety and full of concentration for the work. And I'm sure I was not a very relaxing person to be around. It's all to make something great. There's intensity and perfectionism, and people can be difficult.
I've heard lots of stories about like, when James Cameron was working on Titanic, say, that the crew, it was quite a grueling shoot. It went for a really long time. There were all kinds of issues, but he was working 24 hours a day. So I think he was expecting everybody else was going to be working 24 hours a day too, because that's the kind of like focused, concentrated effort it takes to make something of that scale. And you're either in for the ride or you're not. If you are super talented the way that James Cameron is, then you can probably get away with that. And he's acknowledged in interviews. Like, he used to be a different person than he is now. But like, I think the degree to which you can get away with that behavior is in direct proportion to your actual talent. If you're a super talented person, then you maybe can get away with like really bad behavior. You cannot get away with that if you're not talented.
Yes, I mean, I don't think there's any excuse, certainly not anymore, to be a yeller or to be abusive or just to be mean. Like when I get bad, in my version of bad, it's like I'm not there. I'm a little snotty, I'm arrogant, but I'm not screaming at people. I'm just
right. You're not a screamer.
No. I'm just like, I'm in this world that I'm in to try and do this thing, and I'm getting frustrated, and it's like, well, I can't talk to him. I asked him a question, he said, I can't deal with this now. And that was probably true.
Yeah, but you're not throwing staplers like certain industry producers have been known to do.
No, the throwing things and the screaming and the abuse and the Trump stuff. I mean, that's just a sign of like a bad childhood and just I don't know. Are we allowed to just say people have rotten personalities, or is everybody?
You can have a rotten personality, and again, but if you're really talented, you'll find a way to make it work somehow. Yeah. But anyway, well, that's the entertainment.
You said J.J. Abrams is a sweetheart.
Oh my God, yeah, he was like JJ when he was just breaking as a screenwriter in the mid '90s to late '90s. He was doing a number of uncredited production rewrites on a number of our movies, including The Rock and Armageddon. And, so he came into the offices and like, just again, the sweetest, nicest, most down to earth guy. So like, it's one of those things where, I mean, I don't begrudge him any of the success that he's had. And this is one of the biggest filmmakers in the world, worked on every major franchise, but a nice guy, like a genuine.
Yeah, I was told that like he spends a lot of money because he changes his mind. Mm-hmm. He's going to be indecisive, and it's his process to spend a lot of money, but everybody loves him so much that they indulge him.
Yeah. And again, he works super hard. He's super creative. He's super productive. But again, he's no obligation to be nice. Like, you can be a very prickly kind of person. And he was not that. Like, he was the opposite of that.
Yeah,
like nice person.
But I think there's an edge there, because I saw him do a Q&A after Star Trek, and someone said, do you have any regrets about destroying Vulcan with its 5 billion Vulcans? And he goes, none whatsoever. I mean,
I mean, again, that's
killed fictional people. Who cares?
No, it's just one of those funny questions that you ask somebody. They make fun of that on The Simpsons when they're talking about like when you were playing the xylophone made out of like Scratchy's body, and you hit one of the ribs and it made an A minor than a B plus or whatever it is. It's like a silly question about the industry, and you get a lot of those. But anyway, he's a nice guy. It's very sad that Bruce is going through what he's going through. And then we'll see how the industry handles Will moving forward. And I'm already reading articles about, agents off the record basically saying, I'm pulling back projects. I don't want to work with him. I guess we'll see. We'll see
I
what
don't know
happens.
how long that'll last.
Well, we'll see. I mean, yeah, he didn't do like a Mel Gibson kind of thing, right? Where he was like pissing off 80% of Hollywood with his comments.
Yeah, it's a very, very unfortunate thing, and we will have to see. So what about our pathetic careers? How can we help ourselves? There's we'd like to greet the tens of people watching this, by the way. And so we have like around 150 to 200 views per episode we've done, but I've gone into the analytics and they're really only like 10 to 20 people watching the whole hour.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
But we're not expecting, this is more fun for us. But if we wanted to make this show real, we have to take user submissions because it is, and this is what I wanted to talk about today, because I know just from now and from the 20 years of my trying to do this, all you want is somebody serious to read your thing. And then you're just so absolutely confident that they will love you and think you're a genius. And then you're always crushed when they don't. But that drive to be heard and to be seen and be read is something that we can use to grow our profiles. Because if we took their submissions or analyzed their log lines, people would tune in. We could get a serious viewership. And in fact, I drew up like a little submission form, but we're still not sure of the, we could get
legal ramifications. Yeah.
Yeah, because then if we develop a similar project, someone can sue us and say, I pitched that progress on your show 10 years ago.
Well, but there's also like the exposure to the public, how would you or I feel if we submitted our screenplay to, let's say, a show that has a larger viewership, and they tore our material to pieces. Now, I think what we're telling you guys is we're not going to be jerkwads about that when we're reading it. We're just really going to try to be zeroing in on how could this material be made better, and what are the thoughts of the people who are going to read your material when you submit it. Because at the end of the day, that's what I did for 30 years, right? I read countless screenplays looking for things I can bring to my boss and say,
what were the patterns in what you got in the way that they didn't?
You mean in terms of the kind of genres of things that we saw coming in?
I don't know, because I was thinking here are some things that I've read a lot of these, I've written a lot of these, and the things I see over and over again. I see, and the things I used to write were like the fantasy Star Wars universe, where in the first 5 pages we're destroying a galaxy, and it's like the hero's journey, and we've got these aliens against this aliens, and it's just all this world building. Right. And that is the one thing that it's like, just don't do. If you're gonna write a novel, there's nobody wants to read this from anybody, because these movies, the only way they ever get made is with high-end existing properties from high-end filmmakers, and nobody wants it. There's no market for it.
Well, and by the way, when you've seen like a lot of original big sci-fi ideas with big stars, they haven't always done great. I mean, remember Tom Cruise did a couple of like big original sci-fi projects like Oblivion that didn't do well. Will Smith did that After Earth original that didn't do well. You had Matt Damon do Elysium that didn't do well.
Well, let's talk about these. Elysium was the second movie by the District 9 guy.
Yeah.
So he earned a choice to make a bomb. He earned the chance to make a bomb.
Right.
Lived up to that. And then he went did it again with Chappie. So we don't quite know what's going on. And he hasn't made a movie since, has he?
Well, no, I think he was like in the running to make one of the Alien follow-ups.
Yeah,
one of the Alien
follow-ups. I don't know. Happen, but we won't dump on him, because District 9 is awesome, and he's got a lot of technique and a lot of talent. I saw Elysium and I was like, I can't believe how bad this is. Yeah. And then what was the other one you just mentioned?
Well, there was After Earth with Will Smith.
After Earth was like a vanity project for the Smiths, for trying to make his kid a movie star. Right. And then they got. That was a Night Shyamalan.
Shyamalan directed it. Yeah, I think it was written by Gary Whitta, but it was directed by Shyamalan. So that was like when Shyamalan was in the wilderness for a little while there. Yeah.
Right. And Oblivion was based on, I'm pretty sure that was based on a graphic novel, and it was directed by the guy who directed the Tron sequel. So these are like big Oscar.
Oh, Joe Krasinski, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But if you also, so what people do wrong in the fantasy world things is that they're a remove on a remove, and they're too diffuse.
Right.
And they're like, well, we're going to set this in a space colony, and then it's going to be about doctors on a space colony. So the space colony is the remove, and then the doctors on the space colony is the second remove. And unless you're a genius and somehow it's MASH, it's like, just write doctors. But if you're going to write the colony, it's got to be about the colony. If you're going to write whatever it has to be, if it's removed from the everyday world, it has to be about the thing that it's most obviously about.
But you also still need a concept. What you're talking about are like backdrops or like arenas or but they're not about a character doing something. Or again, there's no big idea. If you're talking about doctors in space, that's like, again, half an idea. Right. Doctors in space, and what's the next part of the idea? Like Fantastic Voyage is a great example, right? It's a politician is assassinated, and he's going to die, and the world is at stake if they don't find a way to save his life. And what do? They shrink down a team of scientists to like be injected into the guy to help figure out how to save his life. That's super high concept.
So, but what I typically see, and I know because I've written these things, is that the people want to do the $300 million fantasy universe, and then it's pretty generic stuff where there's the hero, there's the princess, maybe the princess is the hero, there's the villain, there's some family, there's some, the elaborate political system, and it's just like
generic. It's generic.
It's generic, and that's unreadable, because what happens is you're reading this, and it's the first 3 pages are about the formation of the galaxy, and then you meet the school child who's going to be the Messiah, and then you meet but it's all, there's nothing relatable. I mean, it's all
and it's all very schematic.
Here's my point: is they use plot as exposition for their world building. So you're not actually invested in the person who has the problem. I have learned, and tell me if I'm wrong. So like but I've read so many bad openings. The only way to make an opening that really works is that you're going to start with a relatable problem to build an investment in your protagonist.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's and that's why when they're cliches, they're terrible. But the more specific you make it, the real it is. So they always, it's not complicated stuff. It's like a kid who's upset that his daddy left and his parents are divorced. And then, he goes and he tells his teddy bear, "I'll never leave you." It's like something emotional from the heart that is, we don't need to know anything about that person because we understand the feeling of being a little kid, because everybody, newsflash, was at one point a little kid. So you're using,
who's the protagonist and why do we care?
Right.
Yeah.
But what you're doing is you're using the emotion and the relatability of the emotion to build an investment in who your protagonist is. You want to be specific, and you want to set up that this person wants something because of this emotional wound. And if you do that,
want something or need something, right? It could be something
and
that
they'll be
proactively
separate.
Want, they need. Yeah.
Yes, and people who've spent any time with the craft know that the characters, these journeys work when people want something, but what they want the ruby slippers, but what they really need is to accept that they love their home.
Right.
So and then the thing that they're chasing, they really want it, but it's the other thing that they really need that makes them complete as a character, and then the movie ends. So but when people build their scripts, it's like, well, I want to show that this person is being chased, so I'm going to start with these people chasing these people because these people, it's all a backdrop, and I can't even explain it well, because when I read these things, your eyes glaze over and your mind wanders, because there's so much work. It's so much work to figure out, what does this writer want me to figure out from this plot? Because plot by itself is not interesting. So, there's a rocket ship that has to go to the moon, or these people are chasing these people. If you don't have the human part of it, you don't know, wait, am I rooting for the people who are running away, or am I rooting for the people who are trying to catch them? Even if I think these people who are like the innocent kids are being chased by the stormtroopers. So I think I'll root for the innocent kids, but I don't know why they're being chased. So I don't care.
Right. Well, it's again, when you're first reading a screenplay, obviously it's important to establish like, who am I following? Why do I care? And what are they facing? Those are the kind of the big questions. And the earlier you can answer those questions to kind of hook your audience into giving a damn about the story you're telling, that's important. Now you can open with theme or plot or story world, as long as it's like establishing what the premise is. But the best movies are the ones that wed that to also introducing the character, like the opening of Minority Report, which is an amazing opening sequence where you're establishing, you know, Tom Cruise, what he does. There's like incredible suspense. You're building the world in real time. Like that's a little mini masterclass again in how to establish you know, a sci-fi world and a character that you care about, and it instantly pulls you in. Now, obviously, every movie can't do that, but like, you know, who's the lead? Why do we care about them? What are they facing? You know, what is the status quo of the world? Those are all kind of basic questions that better be answered within, you know, 3 to 5 pages.
Right, and you need to know the answers to all these. So you really need to know. You need to know the whole thing. I don't find it. I can tell from the first 5, you know, 1 page if it's going to be any good, because you can tell when you're in good hands. But writing, you need to know. I need to know the whole thing, and then I figure out. It's all, to me, it's all very holistic, and it's a math problem, and it's who. And then because the opening can be any number of 300 different things. It's about figuring out the one that works perfectly for. So I don't like to give notes just on the first 15 pages, except if I'm going to explain these are all the reasons why I would not keep on reading it, because it's just not professional enough to be worth the time. There's no concept here. But if I was trying to say, how do you actually do this? I need to know how it ends, and I need to know the math of the protagonist, the antagonist, and the theme, and the, you know, then you're talking about structure and set pieces, and you want the simplicity. You don't want any wasted stuff.
Right.
Everything has to connect. There's Chekhov's gun. If you see the gun, that gun better be fired in Act 2 or 3.
Because screenplays by definition are a limited format, right? I mean, you've only got about 110 pages to tell your story, so you can't afford anything extraneous in a feature film.
So what I'm saying, like, if we were doing a script analysis on behalf of a user submission, I mean, we can almost do like half of it just as a hypothetical for what we would get and be likely to have a problem with, because people don't. The screen, you know, you heard the expression about a river that runs narrow but deep, and for a screenplay to work, it needs to be narrow and deep. And the most amateur scripts are shallow and wide, because and by deep I mean it has to go really to the truth of some kind of human experience, and so that people can connect to it. You probably have heard the expression, executives passing with, I'm sorry, I didn't really connect to it. And that's usually code for, I can't make money on this. But it's also truthful that, like, there's nothing there for them to grasp. The reason that people are in the movie business and not in insurance is because they do have an emotional connection to movies and storytelling, and they want to be in some sort of proximity to it.
Right. And I think what's fascinating is, as you're saying, when it comes to being in good hands, a good writer can make you care about seemingly nothing, right? Because they're just so good at character and dialogue and observed behavior. And so, you know, you can open up on a guy waiting for a doctor to come in with a report, and like, it's like, that's not that big of a deal, but like in the hands of a really great writer, it's suspenseful, it's relatable, you know, there's dread, there's kind of like, you know, this person's life is about to change within 2 pages, 3 pages. And if you do a really good job of it, you're immediately on board with that story. You want to find out what's going to happen now.
And he doesn't also need to be chased by aliens at the same time.
But
that's what often, like, he gets, for all the talk about people get into start scenes too early, I tend to find that they get into movies too late, where there's so much backstory and there's so much, everybody has, it's just too much, and it becomes very unclear. And then clarity, the clarity of like, I can't be hunting around in the first 10 pages for who the protagonist is. If it's not clear, the structure's wrong.
I agree. And again, it isn't rocket science. Look at the movies you like and just see how the movies that you like open in the first 10 minutes, and you'll sort of start to see that everything we're talking about, establish who the lead is, establish the status quo world, establish why we care about them, and then what upsets the status quo, what changes that.
I would actually like to go backwards, because now I'm remembering all the crappy scripts I wrote, and the only way I learned was having people like you like politely explain in great length why it sucks, because then it was a lesson. Like, I guess I can't keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I need to somehow do this differently. Or if I did have a concept that I thought was cool and I want to redevelop that concept, I need to do this differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have often found, and this is why I'm sort of, I can often be a difficult person to get notes from, because if you figure out the concept, whatever it is, and then you're trying to figure out who is the protagonist who can have a story that mines this concept for what it is. And that is a period of exploration that can last a long time, because as smart as you might be and as experienced you might be, you don't really know until you've done some of the exploration. And you might find that I thought whatever this concept was, the best person would be, if the concept is to do something with sexual harassment, I might find that the person being harassed, but it might be the person doing the harassment. It might be a person who thinks she could never get harassed, or it might be a person who is sort of like a Stockholm syndrome person who goes along with the harasser. What are all the permutations?
It could be a Rashomon type story that's a he said, she said, where you're literally seeing it through both lenses and you don't quite know what happened. Yeah.
Because what you're really trying to get into is, what is it about sexual harassment that is interesting? And I just picked this off. I don't know why this was on the top of my head. But if you are going to, what have we learned about most people who are harassers is because they are themselves wounded people. I think I might have thought about this because I was reading a think piece before we went on the air about how Will Smith was acting out of some kind of trauma when he went and slapped a grown man on television.
Right.
Because you don't, and my wife is a therapist, and she's always talking about, and she has a ton of experience dealing, talking to real people and real clients about that. There's really no bad people. There's just people who have had trauma in their lives that have put them down a path. Like, I think nobody has had more trauma than Kevin Spacey, what I learned about his childhood.
It sounds like it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, if you're, the only way to approach a movie about harassment would be to go deep into the vulnerability and the hurt of somebody who's a harasser. And I remember now, what's the movie with is it called
Disclosure?
No, I know Disclosure. Happiness, the pedophile.
Oh, Todd Solondz film.
Yeah, that guy's good. Dylan Scott. Is that?
I forget. I know the actor.
You know the movie about. I mean, where you become empathetic towards this pedophile.
That's a very, very risky movie to make for sure. Yeah.
Do not try this at home.
Yeah.
So anyway, but my point is that in order to take your concept to an executed script that's really going to connect with people and to move people, you need to be able to plumb the depths of human experience. And
well, look at a show like Breaking Bad, right? I mean, that was a show that, yeah, the what was the pitch that Vince Gilligan originally said? I want I want to go from Goodbye, Mr. Chips to Scarface. I want to take sort of a likable, relatable teacher, and then turn him into a villain by the end of the show, bit by bit by bit by bit. So you're with him and you're on the journey. And that's a pretty ballsy idea. Now, granted, it came after The Sopranos, right? And so, the ground was already a little softened by what David Chase did and putting you into the mind of a murderous mobster, but making him sort of somebody who's relatable because he's got a mother, he's got a family, he's got people he works with, he's got to deal with all that. He just also happens to be a sociopathic, cold-blooded killer. And that's, so you're kind of peeling the onion of Tony Soprano. And they had this brilliant idea of opening the show with him in therapy, where you have a great organic reason to like explore this guy's life and why he's going through what he's going through. But like Breaking Bad is like, you're moving further and further away from like a relatable character into somebody that is making terrible, scary choices.
Yeah, but we're always with him, partly because it was a lead performance for the ages.
Yeah.
Well, the whole show was just so brilliantly executed. I mean, and
it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy, right? I mean, that is, and tragedy is a viable type of story. You can tell a story about a character who basically like, rises and falls. That there's plenty of movies.
Have you heard the criticism of Breaking Bad?
No.
The criticism that it's like not a white savior, but it's sort of like the fact that by magic, this chemistry teacher knows how to make the world's best meth is kind of like a white savior fantasy. It's something about whiteness that somebody pointed out, like, you understand there's a fantasy built into this show.
Well, his name is Walter White. So he's the whitest of the white. That makes sense. But interesting theory. I hadn't thought of that, but it is a fascinating show for that reason, because it's a tragic show over the season.
I mean, the TV that the pantheon to me was The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, The Wire, and Mad Men. Those four. Right. And then I really liked The Shield. I really liked Game of Thrones until they kind of crash landed.
Right. I mean, but that's another great example of like, very complex, interesting characters in a fantasy setting. But the reason that it's so great is because of the complex character. The world building is fine and good, but it's kind of generic fantasy kingdom. But the thing that makes it so interesting, because
Game of Thrones was the first time anybody took a fantasy world and then had people screwing and cutting off heads and just pulverizing each other in this brutal medieval way. So the audience was like, whoa, it was.
Well, the sex and the violence in a fantasy realm and where people were complicated. It wasn't a clear good and evil. It was more nuanced. It was more like real people with jealousies and petty vengeance.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. And that's what held it together, even though it had a problem narratively in that it was so spread out. Once you split up that family, they were all over the place. And so those middle seasons of Game of Thrones had like 8, it wasn't just an A story, B story, C story. It was like A through H. And each episode would spend, 10 minutes. An episode would be 8 minutes with Arya, and then 8 minutes with Sansa, and 8 minutes with Jaime. And that would be a whole episode, because you're just nudging along 8 different characters, each with their own chapter. But that's
a very high degree of difficulty on that show. I mean, the amount of plates they had spinning was incredible. And it was
based on books, and books that took 20 years to get made. And in order for it to be that big a hit, they had to basically film a pilot and throw 80% of it out and recast it, because they went, oops.
Yeah.
People know this, right? That it wasn't Emilia Clarke. I can't remember.
No. I forget who it was, but they threw. I forget, but they threw away. You're right. They threw away an original pilot, and they basically retooled the whole thing. And that's the reason why, because when a show that complex and what they're doing is so difficult to do, I am willing to kind of give them a little leeway as they're kind of wrapping up the saga. I know a lot of people had real problems with the last season, but like, how well they were doing up to that point, you gotta got to give him a lot of credit. I mean, that's a very difficult show
Yeah,
to mount, to
I
write, to
actually,
produce.
I liked the ending when I watched it, and I was troubled I was bothered by the fact that they had been so faithful to the fact that it was a large world and they didn't have air travel, and so that it would take a long time to get from point A to point B. And then all of a second, suddenly they're, like down at the south, and then they're in the North Shore, and so, whoa, hey, you're breaking your own rules, guys.
Yep.
That bothered me more than some of the character turns, but it was a once in a generation achievement.
Yeah. And to circle back to what you were talking about earlier, like you, like me, I think you start with a premise, not a character.
Do I?
Right? Yeah. Most of the time when you're coming up with an idea, do you come up with like, here's a big idea, and now I got to figure out who's the best character to express that idea that I just came up with, as opposed to I come up with a character and I figure out, a story from that
it's I'm mildly uncomfortable talking about myself since I've achieved almost nothing, but I think the best way to do it is what I heard Tony Gilroy say about the Bourne movies, which his way into the Bourne movies was to think of when Bourne is like, he's sitting in the cafe and he can think, I know 8 different ways to kill people and to escape this cafe, but I don't even know my own name. Why? And that was, so to me, there's something human and existential and relatable about a situation pertaining to the concept that hooks me. So, and would make me write it sometimes for like 8 years, doing different versions. And that's really what.
But Bourne is very high concept, like super high concept.
Yeah,
the Bourne identity, the super high concept idea.
Right, but he changed it. He basically threw the book out and did his.
Right.
The book was very. I don't know. I've never read the book, but I do know that the book is very different, and that I do know that making the first Bourne movie was like bloody murder the way they were fighting. Sure. There's like a lot of things, these things like making Game of Thrones was bloody murder, and then it's the world's biggest hit, and I think it gives people the wrong lessons where they go, oh, I could be a genius because everybody hates my stuff. They, they put Home Alone and Turn Around, and that was dumb. But it's like, if we want people to tune into the show, it's like the point is, what can we do for them? And I still think that going over their log lines and going over their scripts in some way would be the thing that we could use to build an audience. What good that would do us, I don't know. But what's my train of thought?
Well, I think we talked about this last week. We're gonna find out. We're gonna talk to a couple of lawyer friends and find out how this would work, because again, while Lukas and I think it would be educational to go through people's log lines and or screenplays, these people who were doing it for would have to be okay with it, obviously. And if your concern is that people are going to steal your idea, this is probably not the show for you. Yeah. Well, but the reality is they're going to have to get their material out there anyway.
Yeah, nobody wants your idea, because your idea is probably not an idea, or it's a lame idea. I mean, I wish someone like, I don't want to ever charge money, and I don't mean to put you on the spot because you do have a script service, consultant service.
It's a sidebar consultancy.
Yeah, yes. Well, we've established that yours is worth money, but for me, I see all these people and their access programs and their classes and their contests, and it's is it fundamentally dishonest? Yeah, it is, because nobody can really teach anybody how to do this. It can be learned but not taught. And so, but the people who can learn it, there are things that would help them. There would have been a lot of things that would have helped me. And now that I've been through a journey of figuring out how to do this, like I would like to be able to convey to people who are sincerely wanting to do it, like how to do it. And think your concept through, find the emotional human relatability to your concept, strip out everything else, keep it simple, keep on, but it's like people want to know, how do we do this? Okay, that sounds good. But because I remember thinking, I need to up my game. I don't know how I get my stuff to a professional level. I don't know the secret. I don't know the magic. And the magic is partly it's learned through the craft of there are tricks, there are techniques to figure out how, like, don't have people get exposition from the television, this program they're watching. There are
Right.
rules that you can learn that will make your stuff better. But most of it is, and you need to do a certain amount of work on yourself to be able to access the emotions that you want to put into the thing. But at the same time, you probably know Nick Meyer. Did I say this on the previous show? One of Nick Meyer's lines is, when I'm writing, I don't want to make myself cry. I want to make the audience cry. So he always says that life is hot, but art is cool.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So
Well, he's a brilliant writer. He
is a brilliant writer.
Yeah.
Just ask him; he'll tell you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's a brilliant writer.
Well, we love you.
And
Nick never watches.
And look, again, it all comes back to if your concept, if your premise, if your idea is not interesting enough, everything else we're talking about doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, as we're discussing when we were going through log lines last time around, if the idea is not intriguing enough, it doesn't matter. You could be Shakespeare, but nobody's going to pick it up because nobody wants to read that particular story unless they are obligated to or have to, or you're a family member or something like that. And even my family members don't read all my scripts.
Well,
but
and
you still need to have.
Even things that look small can have big ideas. I mean, Coda, I understand, is a wonderful.
I saw Coda right before the Oscars, and my wife and I were very moved by it because it is about a young girl leaving home, after high school and setting out to go to college, and what a big deal that is to sort of leave your family. And I related to it because I have 2 college-age kids. So, like, when you're watching a movie like that, it can't help but strike a chord in you. And but it was a very, very well done film. We didn't think it was going to win Best Picture because usually when you think of Oscar winners, they're bigger, more spectacle ideas, or they're ideas that are more cinematically I don't want to say interesting, but like Coda is well directed, but it's not like you're blown away by the direction. It's not trying to do that. It's trying to tell a character-based story, and the directing is very unadorned. It's not like it doesn't grab you in that way, but emotionally it does grab you, and it's a simple, small story, well told, which is a thing. You can do that, and it is kind of high concept. It's the hearing child of a deaf family, and so the movie has a lot of scenes. Here's a funny story about Coda. The version that we watched, apparently we didn't know there were subtitles in the sign language scenes. So we watched the whole movie going like, interesting choice from the director to not include subtitles for these long where the characters are signing. I guess we're supposed to be in the seat of somebody who's watching this and observing this and trying to intuit from their expressions what's going on in the scene. So we watched the whole movie without that, only to find out at the end of it all, there were subtitles. But you know what? It didn't necessarily interfere with our ability to enjoy the film. It was like there were moments where we were a little adrift in some scenes, but like it still had an apple in our throat at the end of the movie. It was still a tearjerker. It still really was profoundly affecting. And so good for them for winning the big award. But yeah, it's a simple, small story. But even then, it's conceptually interesting. There is a concept at the center. It's not just a person leaving home to go to college. I mean, which Yeah.
Do you find it painful to give feedback for a bad script or a bad audition or a bad anything?
Painful. I mean, I guess.
I find it uncomfortable.
Look, it's easy to be a jerk.
No, I don't.
I'm saying it's easy to read it and to just trash something. But the truth of the matter is, like, that's not really helpful, right? If the person is writing the screenplay, then the job is to basically, like I say, most of the time when I read something, one of my first questions is, what did you intend to do? What's your intention? Because the thing is, I want to give you notes not on the movie that I want to see, but the movie that you were trying to write, because that's the important thing, right? So that's why there are a lot of questions about, what's the story as you see it? What's important to you thematically? What are some comparisons to successful movies that you can look to as like inspirational or in the same vein as what you're doing, so that I can get a lay of the land as to what you're trying to accomplish, because that is critically important. Because if I'm giving you notes on something that's not what you're trying to accomplish, what that doesn't do any good either. But if it's really, really, really amateurish, then we're just talking about things like general formatting. The idea itself might be flawed, and here's the reasons why, and let's talk about that. That's why in an ideal world, you really do wish people would like pitch you their ideas and then say, that's a cool idea, go write that, as opposed to like, oh, out of the 10 ideas you pitch, you pick the worst one to spend 6 months on.
Oh.
So I have no interest in reading the script. That's heartbreaking, but it happens a lot.
Yeah, I had the experience of making a very small, very obscure indie movie where we did auditions. And if you've been through that process as a producer or a director, auditioning actors, I found that like, and for me, casting is very intuitive and like, I'm very decisive at it. I think I'm very good at it. So when they walk in the door, I'm immediately going like I'm making a snap judgment the moment I see them that this isn't going to work. And I feel bad. Then it's like, well, let's read them. And then, I feel bad that like, here is somebody trying hard to get something that they're never going to get because I've already decided that I don't want them. I found it was a painful thing for me. I remember reading an anecdote about Leonard Nimoy in his younger days at one point, really empathizing with actors and caring about actors. And this is back in the 60s, and deciding that he wanted to help actors. So there was some show and he decided to read with them for the auditions, or to be there, or to somehow be a part of the process. And he just couldn't do it because it was just so hard for him to empathize with the people who were going to be rejected.
Well, I will say that that's a theme that I find very resonant. I like stories about underdogs who have a crazy dream, and it looks like they might not get that thing they want, and there's a poignancy to that I find very compelling. There was we made a show at Bruckheimer called CSI, right?
I've heard of it.
In the pilot episode, there is a character who's like a young rookie CSI technician who is abducted at the end of the pilot episode, right? And the reality was, after we shot the pilot, for a bunch of reasons I won't get into, they decided not to have that young girl's character come back to the show. Like, you make a pilot and you hope that the networks are going to pick it up to greenlight it for a season. Mm-hmm. And in this case, they did pick up the show, but they didn't pick up that young actress's option to be on the show after that. So they had written a cliffhanger where she was abducted at the end of the CSI episode. And in the next episode, the second episode, she's been killed, but she leaves clues behind that she knows a forensics person will be able to interpret so that there is justice and her killer would be found. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about the young girl who was cast in the pilot to what became one of the biggest shows of all time.
What did happen to her?
I don't know. But she was in the pilot. Yeah. But she was in the pilot. She was in the pilot. And it's heartbreaking to think, like, you got that close. You got that close. You're actually in the pilot of the show. And at the end of the day, they just didn't pick up your option, and you're not in the 20 years the show ran, like that didn't happen. But she made it through all the auditions. She made it on a show that might not get picked up as one of 100. The show gets picked up as one of the biggest hits of all time, and you're not with it. I don't know how you would handle that as an actress or an actor. It must be lacerating. That person must talk to people all the time. And it's just like, I don't know, man. I mean, it's like, it's already so hard to be an actor in this business, and you touch the sun. What do you do from that? And the answer that you and I don't know what happened to her, I guess that says something, which is, I guess she didn't become, Anna Taylor-Joy or some, Jennifer Lawrence. That didn't happen.
Well, acting is so, that's like, you're being judged on the fact that your face photographs very well, that you have a certain constellation of features that reads to the camera. I mean, that's why, thank God we're writers, because when people say that script sucks, you go, I'll write a better one,
We got a face for screenplays, as they used to say. You got a face for radio. Yeah.
No, I really do. But I've been on the other side of it, where I had to cast my movie, and even though it was a super cheap movie, I still needed the right actors, and Back to the Future was recast. Everybody knows that. It was Eric Stoltz, not
maybe some people don't know that, but yeah, this is like a really fascinating what if, which is, you're right, they made the movie originally with Eric Stoltz.
But they also, when they fired Eric Stoltz because he just wasn't the right tone for Marty, they had to fire, I think, Melora Hardin. Is that her name?
Yes, Melora Hardin from The Office.
She's taller than Michael J. Fox. So
yes.
She got fired because she was too tall.
Yeah.
That's bad. I mean,
yeah, and it must have been, and I think it was heartbreaking for Robert Zemeckis and for Steven Spielberg, because I think they shot for 5 or 6 weeks with Eric Stoltz. So they had the whole act 1 of the movie done. And then how do you have that conversation? Like, now, granted, Eric Stoltz is fine. Everything went okay with him. But like the people who are like so close, I find that interesting, because you probably have a million stories. I have a million stories where, God, we were just this close.
I don't. For me,
no. You don't? Okay.
I've never been close to. I've never had anything to the point where it's like we're waiting on the green light committee and they're going to pick X or Y. My friend has. I mean, my occasional writing partner, he had shows on the air for like a year, half a year, and he had pilots that it got down to the network decision choosing X over Y. And, hello, audience. There's a jump cut because I just told an anecdote that I decided I didn't want to share.
Okay. Wouldn't you like to know what that was?
Not that
yeah. But I will say, yeah, just, people who get so close and then it doesn't happen for them. There's a great poignancy to that. I know somebody who was the runner-up to play Anakin Skywalker in Phantom Menace. It was down to the kid. Was it Jake Lloyd? I forget what his name was. The kid who played Darth Vader, and then the kid who was like the 50-50 choice to play young Darth Vader.
I think I've seen those auditions.
Like how that could have changed your life.
But what do you think about your life? Are you thinking like, man, I just had some bad breaks, or the next one's going to be the good one? You see,
I think I mean, I'm a perfect example. I think that me, and there are many writers that I know, you're one of them. I know many of them, which is, I wouldn't have gotten this far and still be wanting to write if I wouldn't have had bits and pieces of validation along the way. You've had validation. You've sold things. You've gotten movies made. You've worked with actual produced writers. You've had validation. Would you do this for another 5 or 10 years if you didn't have those bits of validation? Maybe not. Like most people probably would give up after a handful of years. You might go, this is not going to happen for me, right? Early on, stop me if I've said this before, but like when I was in college, my friends and I wrote all the time because we loved movies and we wanted to write. And so it wasn't for school we were writing. It was for us we were writing. And we would write, after school and evenings and weekends, and we would write screenplays, and we would like look in the back of the drama log and backstage and who's looking for screenplays, and fly by night companies, but who knows, we'll send them the screenplay. And like in 1 or 2 times in college, some of those companies out in LA, a place I'd never been to, liked the scripts, offered us a couple $100 for an option. I'm like, okay, that's sort of validation. And then when I graduated from college, My screenwriting professor said there's a local filmmaker here who's looking for somebody to write his idea over the summer. There's only a handful of screenwriting students I think this much of. I gave him your name. And I spent my summer after college writing a science fiction, low budget science fiction movie for a local filmmaker.
I did have a validating moment. When all right, so I'll tell one self-aggrandizing story. So when we were making my short film, we were doing these little flashbacks, and we had to go up to Angeles National Forest, and we hired a terrific actor, Eric Palladino. You might not know the name, but you've seen him in ER and on Mrs. Maisel. You've seen his face over and over. And you know, good actor. It was a delight to spend a morning with him. And on the car ride up to this shoot, I was sitting, he's in the front seat, I'm behind him, and he goes, hey, who wrote this? Did you write it? I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, it was pretty cool, man. He said, you know, you've been doing this like 20 years. I've never done a short. Been asked once in a while, maybe, but this one came in. I was like, yeah, I'll do this. I was like, whoa, cool, thank you. He's like, yeah, it was pretty cool. And I said, sure, I'll do this. You know, we made a fair offer for a morning's work, and he said yes. That was really validating.
But that's why you need the attaboys, because the thing is, like, as you're coming up and as you're learning your craft, you want to at least believe that you're on the right path. If you don't get any of that, then it's harder to keep, you know, your mojo,
and God damn it, if these people don't prey on that, these screenwriting contests who have like 500 quarterfinalists, I mean, this is just a machine that is turning people's hope into money.
But let me say this to you all out there, which is, it's easy enough to find out how credible any of these people are. You have the internet, which is something we didn't have 25, 30 years ago. You know, do these contests matter? Do you hear success stories, specific success stories about the people winning these things going on to like get jobs? I mean, if there are, then okay, then maybe that's something. If there are people who are saying, I'll read your screenplay for you and give you feedback and give you notes, who are they? Where have they worked? What have they done? What films have they worked on, or production companies have they worked on? What is their track record? Like you can look up information. When it comes to me, I'm an open book. I'm online. I have credits in movies. You can see that I worked for Jerry for 30 years. You can see the films that we made and the writers that we worked with. That's something you should do every time you consider, you know, parting your money to give somebody an opportunity to read your material. Otherwise, yeah, you are just being ripped off. Yeah, there are a lot of people trying to.
But they want the validation of the little badge, and I don't know. It's
But that's a very human thing, right?
It's a human thing. It's not as sad as Ukraine. I find it somewhat sad because just as a matter of math, you know, 99% of the folks trying to do this aren't going to get there, and probably a good 80 to 90% just don't have it in them to have the degree of imagination and taste and a ceiling to their, you know, their ability to make something saleable. And doesn't mean that they might not. I don't know. That's just reality. And I've been meaning.
Right. I mean, you're right. You're right. The odds are against it. The odds are against you. You know, the odds are against you ever reaching your dreams of whatever it is you want to do. It could be being a basketball player, playing in, you know, in an orchestra, any creative endeavor. At the end of the day, right? If you need other people's validation to achieve your dreams, it's always going to be a bit of a crapshoot, which is the reason why now you see so many like TikTokers and influencers and people like two guys like us on YouTube. You know, we can create this show without having to worry about, you know, distribution or people picking it up, or, you know, worrying about offending some, you know, guidelines or a censor. Like, there is something great about the democratization of technology now, allowing anybody from their living room to talk to the world and get their ideas out there. And you're seeing, you know, 17-year-old girls making millions of dollars from their bedroom. I'm not talking about the ones on OnlyFans. Yeah. I'm talking about like, you know, influencers. I'm talking about like my daughter watches these people. I don't know who they are, but my daughter knows them, and they're buying multi-million-dollar houses, and they're literally talking to camera in their bedroom. And just like, good for them.
There's always been a market for pretty people on television.
Yes, for sure. for sure.
I kept on wanting to ask you, do you have Don Simpson stories? Were you there when Don was alive?
I have lots of Don Simpson stories, but that's definitely not definitely not for our YouTube show. That's for when we get together and have some bourbon between you and I, and you know, it's like, now, let me tell you. But yeah, there are lots of interesting stuff. By the way, just like with Will, all my interaction with Don Simpson was awesome. He was one of the most, you know, brilliant, creative, focused minds that I'd ever worked with. And like, he did have a reputation for behavior. I was never on the receiving end of it. So like, all I can say about him from my perspective, it was always fantastic to talk to Don about story and development. And he just had an amazing mind for that kind of stuff. Other than that, lots of stuff happened, but I was not really, you know, privy.
People are talented, can be really, really talented. And there are people who come out of nowhere who are just intuitively great writers and get discovered and have great careers. And it's just rare. It's just rare because you can't really, they're mowing the lawn or they're doing, it was about time to wrap up because there's like a window out my window.
Right, the gardener show is about to begin, but
so let's figure out how to take people's log lines and I think like from the heart, I would just like to be able to help people and to give them whatever tools or advice lets them think about their things in a way that's going to be productive to improving, as opposed to trying to take their money.
Yeah, and I know there's a comment section on YouTube. So if you're somebody who is even remotely considering trusting us with reading your material, maybe you want to kind of wave out to us and say you've got something that we might want to take a look at, and we'll find out the legal ramifications of doing so. Yeah. But I think this could be very helpful to people out there. And I know that if I was, I am still a writer, always trying to prove myself, but like, you know, if I was just starting out, and I had an opportunity for something like this, I think I'd really love to give it a go. So let's see what we can do to make that happen. What do you say?
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for another hour plus, Charlie. And I guess we'll say goodbye and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Fun as always. All right. Thanks, gang. Take care. All right.
I'll go get the leaf blower out. All right. Thanks, folks.